Hi everyone and welcome to class 7 social sciences. So today's topic of learning is state government. Now before I introduce this topic of state government, remember there are only few differences between running a state government and a union government. Basically the structure of any government that you go across in the world, it remains the same. So all governments will have power to make laws. All governments will have power to enforce the laws that they have made and to also interpret the laws. So basically there are three structures which I am going to explain today in our state government and what all is executive, legislature and judiciary. So welcome to 7 and this is your chapter number 14, and if you have your social science textbook right in front of your eyes, you can take out page number 97. So we have these 5 pages, pages 97 to 102. So as you can see this pyramid, the central government is of course like a boss in any country, because even the states, if it is a federal state, it has to adhere to whatever the union government says. So the central government is on the top of the power, then comes your state government and then your local self-government. So central government is Government of India, state government is Nagaland government, and local self-government is all the panchayats and the local bodies that we have elections. So remember, in a democratic country, all these three government, which is central, state and local self-government, all these three governments will always be elected by you and me as citizens. So if you are in the age group of 18 onwards, you can be a voter. So this is the pyramid of the government, any government that is there in the world: central, state and local self-government. So now this is the structure of the state government. So let me first explain before we go on to this diagram. So there are structures which are three structure of a state government. The first one will be a legislature. So legislature is a place where you're making your laws. So legislature can be a state assembly. Now in few states you have two, and few you have only one. So this is Vidhan Sabha. I'll explain it to you as we go on to the slides, and Vidhan Parishad. If it is a union government, then it would be the Parliament, Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. So that is your legislature, where you have your discussions and where your rules are made inside. Then the second structure is of the executive. Now executive is your prime minister, his cabinet ministers. In the state, it would be the chief minister, his cabinet ministers. If I explain it into a very simple term, you have a school. So the CBSE board will be your legislature, because they are going to tell you the rules and the laws. Your principal is going to be your executive, because he's the one who's going to try to implement those rules and regulations. The third structure of the government is your judiciary. That is absolutely independent. So judiciary is the one which sees the law and implements it into the cases. So if I have a criminal case against somebody, the law has to be passed by the legislation, and only then the court is going to interpret that law. So that's how the three structure of any government is. The first one is the legislature. It legislates the bills, makes it into law. Second is the executive, which is going to implement those rules and regulations. And third is the judiciary. So even in the executive and the legislature and the judiciary, there are few subdivisions that we are going to be learning. So remember, CBSE board is going to be the one that legislates for you the rules and regulations. Your principal is going to implement it. So that's whoever is implementing is the executive. So in a state government, it is going to be your chief minister and his council of ministers, and everybody in the departmental who are the heads. So if it is a police department, it would be the DGP. If it is the health and family welfare, it would be the director of that department. So that's your executive. So now let's go on to the graph that I have for you. So as I explained, the state government is divided into executive, legislature and judiciary. Now, in your executive power, but before we go on to the executive, let's first go to the legislature, because that's the first structure that comes into our minds. So, legislature, as I explained, is divided into two houses. So, I'm not going to tell you anything about the union government, because let's stick to the state government. So, there are few states which have two, but very few. Most of the states would only have one, and that would be the legislative assembly. So, even in Nagaland, we just have the lower house or only one house, and we call it legislative assembly. So, that is your legislature. Now, what is the legislative assembly supposed to do? So, inside the legislative assembly, if the government of Nagaland wants to pass a bill, like in this assembly session, there was a bill on GST. There was also a bill that was on Lokayukta. So what they do is they put that bill, they put that proposal into that assembly, and all the members, all the MLAs discuss that bill. Once the discussion is done, they put it into vote, and then it becomes a bill. So that is what the legislative assembly is supposed to be doing. And that is why we also sometimes call the MLAs as lawmakers, because here in this assembly, all the MLAs gather to make and discuss laws which are good for our state. So that's the first part or first structure of any government. The second structure is, once the law has been made, then it goes for the executive. Now, in the executive, the first and foremost is the governor. So, once the assembly has passed that law, it goes to the governor to make it into, it's the bill and it becomes the law when the governor puts a signature. So, if you're talking about the executive, the first and foremost would be your governor. Second comes your chief minister and then his council of ministers. So remember, the council of ministers, or we also call them as cabinet ministers. So it is the chief minister's power. It is his right that he can decide, and he makes the cabinet of his own choice. He picks up ministers from his MLAs, from his party, and makes them into ministers. So the council of ministers are also known as cabinet ministers, and whatever the chief minister does, he makes those decisions in tandem or in consultation with his cabinet ministers. So we've done the legislative, we've done the executive. Now comes our third structure, and that is judiciary. So in judiciary, in the state government, we are not talking about the union government, because the union government will have its Supreme Court, but we are talking about the state government. So all the state governments in the judiciary will have a high court of its own. Then there are going to be district courts and some more courts which are below the district courts. All right. So this is how the structure of any state government in India is made. Legislature, who's making and discussing the bills. Then it goes to the executive, the governor, it makes it into the law, and then the judiciary, which is going to interpret. So that's the three structure of any state government: legislature, executive and judiciary. So India is divided into three levels for better governance: center, state and union territories. Each state is governed by an elected state government. So whenever there is a government in a state, now how would that government come? It is because of you. It is because of the Indian citizens. It is because of the state citizens who are 18 and above, and who are the ones who vote for their respective candidates. So when the government is made, it is based on your choice and your selection. So remember, when you're voting, make sure that you put the best man as an MLA, so that you get the best government in your country. So the chief minister, the governor, his council of ministers, and they are all going to be there for a term of 5 years. Now, because India is a big country, to make things easier, you have the Union of India, then you have the state, and then you have your union territories. So each state will have, as I told you, an elected state government. So governor, chief minister, cabinet ministers, and all of them are elected for 5 years. So this is a scene of any assembly that is there. Most of the times I have seen a round assembly. Maybe it's better for discussion or something like that. So that's the picture of inside discussion happening in the assemblies. Now the governor is appointed by the president for a term of 5 years. Now remember, the governor is somebody who's not elected directly, because people who are elected directly are more powerful because you make them powerful with your vote. Here, the governor is not the one who is in the saddle. He is just a titular head. So because he's just a decorative piece in the other states, not in Nagaland, but in the other states, the actual power is in the hands of the people who you have elected. So the elected government is your chief minister, your MLAs who become ministers, some become ministers, some become something else. So those are the ones who have the power. So that is why governor is not elected, he's just appointed, and he's appointed by the President of India, and he's elected for 5 years. Now when and if you wanted to become a governor, so what are the qualifications that you must have to be a governor in any state? So we'll come to that later, I think. This is the state legislature. States which have one house is called unicameral, and those with two are bicameral. And Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad is what we say in Hindi. So Vidhan Sabha is your assembly and Vidhan Parishad is your council. So in Nagaland, we do not have two houses, so it's not a bicameral, it is unicameral. Uni is one. So we just have the assembly. So it is Vidhan Sabha. Now, process of electing the representatives in the state. Now, each state is divided into constituencies, and each constituency would be having one member. So, if you have to elect an MLA, he has to be belonging to one specific constituency. Now, how are the constituencies formed? That is for the Election Commission of India to decide. So, one constituency and there will be one MLAs. Now, most of the times you should have more than 60, but there is this Goa, Mizoram and Sikkim who do not have even 60 members. So, which means it's a very small state and the constituencies are not even 60, so they do not have members, 60 members. So, these are the three states among who are less. So, party with the maximum number of seat forms the government. So, if it is a 100-member assembly and I get 60 votes, so which means it is more than 40. So, 60 is the one who's going to be the winner. So, it's as simple as that. So, you vote and you vote for me, I'll be the winner and I will be the one forming the government. And remember, the government is formed for 5 years. Alright, so who are the ones who can stand for election? Now remember, these are elections for MLAs that we are talking. MLAs are the Legislative Assembly. So in your state, you have to be the citizen of India. If you're not a citizen of India and you do not have the voting rights, you cannot even stand for an MLA. Your age should be 25, so which means I can stand, you cannot stand. Should not be a government employee. Why? Because it is a thought process of government that if you are already earning from somewhere, you will not be able to serve the country better. So you should have that emotion of serving the country and not earning from it. So you should not be a government employee, you should be 25 years, you should be a citizen of India. You should be a registered voter. It cannot be that I stay in Delhi and I get my voting card from Delhi and I want to come and vote in Nagaland State Assembly. That's not possible. So you have to be a registered voter in your own state to get your voting rights. Then you should not have a criminal record. Unfortunately, I don't know about the other countries, but unfortunately in India, we do have people standing even with a criminal record. But it is not advisable to have MLAs who already have criminal records. So these are the 5 features that you should have if you want to stand as an MLA for elections. Alright, so now we do not in Nagaland have Vidhan Parishad, but we are still going to learn for other states who have these Vidhan Parishad. So I told you that in the assembly, you are the one who's going to vote if you are 18 plus. But in the Vidhan Parishad, we are not voting. So it is only in the assembly that we vote, not in the council. Vidhan Parishad is the council. So here, how do we have members? So members are not elected directly by the people. So you and me are not going to be electing members who are there in the council. So how do we have those members? 1/3 are elected by the Vidhan Sabha. So 1/3 of the total members are going to be elected from the assembly. So the legislative assembly, 1/3 people are coming from there for, so they are the ones who are going to get the voting rights. So in the assembly, MLAs would vote for Vidhan Sabha. Vidhan Sabha is the council. Then 1/3 members from the local bodies. So just I told you that there are panchayats, that is the local self-government. So people from local bodies are also going to be electing 1/3. So 1/3 coming from the legislative assembly, the other 1/3 coming from the local bodies, then 1/6 people coming from field of art, science, literature. So there are times in the parliament that we hear that, oh, Hema Malini is, no, not Hema Malini, she's elected now. Jaya Bachchan is a MP, or Sachin Tendulkar is an MP, but he doesn't attend the session. So those are the 1/6 people who come from various fields. So if they are good in their respective fields, they are also allowed to be a part of discussion in the council. Then 1/12 by the secondary school teachers. So if you are a teacher from a secondary school, you get that right to choose 1/12 people for becoming members in the council. And then 1/12 are re-elected by the graduate of any universities. But remember, Nagaland does not have the council. We only have one house. We are unicameral. So we do not get these members, but states who do have bicameral, this is how a parishad or a council will be elected or selected. So members of the legislative assembly, that we also call in Hindi as Vidhan Sabha. These members are elected directly by the people of the state. So you go and vote for a particular candidate or a particular party, and that becomes an MLA if he gets the majority votes. They are all of them elected for 5 years. After the election, whoever gets the majority in the party, they elect their own speaker and deputy speaker. Now remember, the speaker and deputy speaker are coming from the same MLAs. The third, if there is an emergency and the governor thinks that the law and order has broken down, or there is a financial emergency, the government is not able to even pay the salaries of the government employees or things like that, or there is a war-like situation, the governor can dissolve the house before 5 years. Also, in the same situation, if the governor feels, he can also extend for 1 year. So basically the tenure is 5 years, but if the governor wants, it can dissolve before the 5 years, but remember, he has to ask for re-election. And if he feels that there is a problem somewhere and he wants no election, he can extend it for a year. So these are the members, and this is how your legislative assembly is formed. Now, what are the functions of the state legislature? The first thing is that they are making laws. So there are 3 kinds of list: union, state and concurrent list. So union list, the subjects only the government of India will make. State list, like you have your health, you have law and order, you have police. So these are the state subjects that you can make your laws. Concurrent list is few subjects the state can make laws, and few the union government of India can make your laws. Then the second function of a state legislature is financial decisions. So whatever the state budget is, how should it look, what are the spendings, how do you earn, this is all decided by the legislature, by the government. Then the third is the law and order, which is very important. So three functions of the state legislature. The first and foremost, the important one is the lawmaking. I just told you that there was one GST and Lokayukta which had the discussion in the previous assembly, just right now when we had the session. Then the financial decision, that includes the state budget and law and order. So these are the foremost and important functions of any state legislature. Now, how do you make a law? So, it is the legislation and the process, the way you make the law is known as legislation. So, if I say I legislate that, it means I'm making that law. So, before a law is passed, a draft of the same, which means if I want to have a law which says that, okay, one can have a remarriage. If that wants to become a law, what I do is I just put that draft into the assembly, and opposition and the government, everybody is going to discuss, because that is how the bill is introduced. Once the discussion is done and I am satisfied as an opposition, I am going to vote. The moment I vote, and if the majority of the votes say yes, we agree to this bill being passed, then it is passed from the assembly. Once it is gone through, after the voting, it goes to the governor for approval. If the governor says, yes, I agree, and he puts a sign, the bill will automatically become a law. Now remember, the governor cannot refuse a bill. The governor has to say yes to whatever the state government is giving him. So that is how a legislature passes a bill which becomes a law after the approval of the governor. Then comes your judiciary. Now judiciary is, all states will have their own high courts, and the judgments can be overruled by the Supreme Court of India. Now it is not always that the Supreme Court would interfere and intervene in the High Court decision, but if it feels that there is a need, it can overrule the High Court. And there are times that I lose in High Court, I can also go and appeal to the Supreme Court. But most of the time, the Supreme Court would not overrule the judgment. So these were the three structures: legislature, executive and judiciary. And remember, the judiciary is absolutely independent. Now comes your executive. So Chief Minister is the real leader, because he's the one who has been elected by you. He is responsible, he presides over the cabinet, and he's the one who makes his own cabinet and makes the council of ministers. And whatever the Chief Minister does, he does based on the advice of his council of ministers. All the oaths that has been taken by the Chief Minister and his cabinet ministers are given by the governor. So now let's go on. I was saying that who can become a governor? So a governor again has to be a citizen of India. He cannot be a government employee, and he has to be 35 years of age. Remember, for an MLA, it is 25. For a governor, it is 35. And the most important thing, he is not a member of the state legislature. Why? Because he is not elected. He is selected by the President of India. So he should not be a part and parcel of the government. He has to be independent of the legislature. Alright, so these are the functions. He has the power to grant pardon. He needs to support the Chief Minister and his ministers at all times. He appoints, he can call the house if he desires. Most of the time, he calls the house only on the advice of the Chief Minister. When the assembly is there for the first time, this first session happens, he needs to address the assembly, and when he is addressing the assembly, remember, whatever the Chief Minister and the government has asked him to read, that is what he is supposed to read. He can give grants, the financial grants, he can pass and reject any bill, but only on the advice. He cannot act independently, whereas the governor of Nagaland has different powers. That is not in our syllabus, so we are not discussing that, but most of the time the governor has to go on to the advice with the Chief Minister. The State Secretariat, where you have your IAS officers, these are the executive members. So the government is going to give you the rules, it becomes the law, and those rules are to be followed by all the secretaries in the government. So this is your state secretariat, where you have the chief minister's office and you have all the IAS officers sitting there. And this is going to be your homework. So I want you to take a political map of India and I want you to mark the states and union territories of India, so that you come to know how many states India has and how many union territories India has. So I do hope that you understood that the state structure or any other political structure is legislative, executive and judiciary, and these are the functions and these are the heads of judiciary, executive and legislature. So bye for now. Have a very wonderful day.